Hey, how y'all doing? Okay, so I'm gonna do a little bit of politics talk because this came up on my wrestling timeline, and I told y'all I was trying not to talk politics, but let's talk about this. Mayor Kane is the mayor of Knoxville. What is it? Knox County, Tennessee. So some people are mad at Kane for this take on the issue of the virus. Let's just call it the virus. So we're gonna read this story, and I'm gonna tell you what I think. Knox County Mayor Glenn Jacobs said Thursday afternoon the county will comply with Governor Bill Lee's new stay-at-home executive order, but warned it will stress the limits of democracy. I applaud the governor for following through with his convictions and fulfilling his duty to protect the people of Tennessee according to his best judgment. Okay, Jacobs said in a Facebook Live video. However, I cannot applaud any government monitoring the movements of its people and mandating virtually everything we are allowed to do. I understand this is a crisis, but an economic crisis also looms with millions of people out of work and no way to earn a living, many of them due to mandated government shutdowns. We also have a looming mental health crisis as individuals struggle with depression and feelings of hopelessness and isolation, exacerbated by job loss. Some have already taken their own lives. Jacobs compared today's virus crisis with the Civil War, quoting President Abraham Lincoln's most famous line from the Gettysburg Address: "Government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from this earth." Knox County will, of course, comply with this executive order, he said. However, with our response to the virus, I fear that we may be testing the very limits of President Lincoln's notion. Jacobs is an ardent libertarian who has been nearly as aggressive as leaders across the state in trying to tamp down the pandemic, instead focusing on what he says is a balance between public safety and personal liberty. 2 weeks ago, after Knoxville Mayor India Kincannon announced a state of emergency for the city, Jacobs released a video on his Twitter account saying the county would not follow with its own unless it became absolutely necessary. The declaration would allow the county to move finances and other resources around more easily. Oh, Monday, a day after Donald Trump announced federal guidelines for social distancing would extend until April 30th, Jacobs said he hopes the county's businesses can open before then. I understand what the president is saying because he is looking at the big picture. We are responsible for the local level, Jacobs said. We need a measured response basically because everything varies greatly and we're on a sliding scale. For example, what's good right now for Nashville might not be right for us. And when what's good for us might not be right for Nashville. Knox County remains the only of the state's largest four counties to not declare a state of emergency. All right, I'm not going to go into the politics of this. I'm just going to go up to a certain point because I want to make this video about wrestling. Okay, since I saw this pop up on my wrestling feed, let's talk about this. Uh, he says, Kane said, well, Mayor Glenn Jacobs, who is Kane, he said, I understand this is a crisis, but an economic crisis also looms with millions of people out of work and no way to earn a living, many of them due to mandated government shutdowns. We also have a looming mental health crisis as individuals struggle with depression and feelings of hopelessness and isolation, exacerbated by job loss. Some have already taken their own lives. Was it not just a couple of weeks ago, people were complaining that Braun Strowman had this pull yourself up by your bootstraps attitude, right? And everyone went online and was like, "Oh, he's such a terrible person. Everyone lost their jobs because of the pandemic. You can't. He's just privileged because he's on the WWE payroll." But here, Kane is saying the same thing, right? Kane is saying, "Hey, the government is forcing people to not be able to work. So all these guys who would be working WrestleMania weekend, which includes a lot of WWE superstars who cannot fly in to perform at WrestleMania." And who have to back out, or they might have had injuries, or the Roman Reigns situation is a little bit different. They can't travel. All of those people are losing money. They now have to find a way to survive when they built an entire year around this one event. This is not just a wrestling thing. This is also South by Southwest. This is also all the big carnivals, and Disney is even losing a ton of money because of this stuff. This is a big issue, This is a big concern. You can't just shut things down. People are losing their jobs. But I see a lot of people out who, who are these right side of history kind of people, these SJWs, that all they do is talk about, just go with whatever the government says. Instead of saying, this guy is worried about people who have lost their jobs and now cannot take care of themselves. That we need to be taught, we need to have a conversation about that. And we do need to have a conversation about it. Why does that upset you? Because you don't want to have that conversation? Or is it because what he said is not true? Because what he said is true. There are people who commit, it was the same thing in the Great Depression, and in the 2008 stock market crash, there's always going to be a certain number of people who lose everything when the market goes down. And there's going to be a lot of people who are unemployed. There's going to be especially a lot of wrestlers, because wrestling is one of the most non-essential businesses in the country. And for people who like comic books, it's the same thing. Comics is going through this situation too. They got the DC and Vertigo and Dark Horse and all these comic book companies that now have the pencils down order. This stuff is coming down fast. And it's really jamming up people's lives. And you can pretend that you don't see it all you want, but it's a fact. When you have people going online saying that they need a GoFundMe because they built their entire year around this WrestleMania and now it's not going to happen, I'm sorry. That is an economic outcome of you shutting down everything, and we do need to have a conversation about that. Because what are you going to do? How are you going to replace the meaning that these people have in their lives? You can start talking all day about, well, at least they're alive. What good is it if they don't have any fucking money? You have to ask that question. I think Kane has a very intelligent, not just because he's a libertarian and I'm a libertarian, but it's just, this is a serious thing to think about. It's a serious thing to have a conversation over. And look, if I was going to talk about the libertarian part of it, I would talk about the personal liberties and government surveillance and all that type of stuff, but I don't even need to get into that. We could just go into the concept of, we understand it's a dire situation, but it is also a dire situation that there are people out here who would rather be working and who have built their entire year around, there's tons of bars that, now that St. Patrick's Day they've missed St. Patrick's Day money, they're probably going to go under. So if you worked in a bar, you're fucked. If you worked in a concert or you run a venue, you might be fucked because you're going to lose a ton of money. This stuff is important. And you can try to have this short-term belief that it's always tomorrow, but for some people it's not. People have put their entire lives into their businesses, built their entire lives around it. Sometimes, just imagine if it was like Christmas. And now, you have people who would stay at home orders during Black Friday. You know what I'm saying? The amount of businesses that will be going under because they don't get any business during Christmas would be astronomical. And it's the same thing now, because not just, like I said, not just WrestleMania, but there's people who lost money because spring break was essentially canceled. St. Patrick's Day was essentially canceled. Easter is going to be essentially canceled. These things are, it's a big deal. And you got to respect people's opinions on this situation, unless you are a complete totalitarian and you are so insensitive and has such this belief that you are correct that, you don't want to dare be challenged. But Kane is a good dude. And this is something to consider and sit down and think about. And I can appreciate that.